And how are you feeling today? Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome to episode 5, 6? Do you remember, Anthony? Let's just go with 5. Hopefully I'm correct. Episode 5 of the Truth in Art podcast. I am your guide, Connor Fowler, again joined by co-host Antoni.
Hello, everyone.
And today's topic of discussion is feelings. Do you feel feelings, or do feelings feel you? Anthony, you want to take it away?
Sure,
What do you think about that one, huh?
Well, it's difficult to know, isn't it? It's really difficult to know because without getting lost in the whole physiological conversation about, the chemicals that get released in your body and the hormones and this and that trigger certain feelings or experiences of certain feelings. When you're living your normal everyday life, of course, you don't think about that. You don't think, oh, yes, I'm low in vitamin
X. Yes, exactly.
And because of that, I feel like this. What happens is you feel it, and then you react to that feeling.
You feel it and it happens, right? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it's true. I mean, a lot of scientific, let's say, discussion around feeling is based. Or rather, let me put it this way: there are two fields, I believe, in psychology that are to do with giving or prescribing drugs. I think they're called physicians, and then there's psychiatrists. Right, a physician is one that can actually give you medication for, let's say, anxiety or depression, while a psychiatrist doesn't, but rather talks to you about them.
No.
Is that wrong?
Wrong.
Okay, would you correct me then?
Psychiatrists prescribe medication.
Psychiatrists. Yeah, that's right. Psychologists, that's right. So, yeah, psychiatrists prescribe medication. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. So psychiatrists prescribe medication, and psychologists will talk to you. Now, obviously, there's different ways of finding out which one's right, because I don't think there's not much of a discussion about whether it's the right thing to do to give someone medication because they're feeling depressed, right?
Well, I'd like to interject very briefly on that one about rightness, which is I think that's interesting you bring that up, because no one thinks that there's a moral question related to giving people eyeglasses so that they can see better.
Yeah.
So, the problem with the way we approach, I suppose we're heading into mental illness, which is what people think of it as. The problem with that is that because we don't see the brain as being ill, we somehow think that there's a moral question there. I don't think there is a moral question.
No, I think you might have misunderstood me. I wasn't looking at it from a moral perspective. I was looking at it more from a resolution perspective. So, for example, I know a lot of times there's a certain success rate, let's say, in medication, right? And this is even for body one, not mental, right? So let's say there's a flu pill, right? And a lot of times, if it works on 3 or 4 people out of, let's say, 50, then it's the one that they'll give.
Yes.
Right? And what happens to the rest of those 47 people, right, where it doesn't work on? They'll just keep giving it to you. And obviously, we're going to have a whole other discussion about pharmaceutical industry, which is, let's not go down that road yet, because it's just bonkers. But I was thinking more about, how are you governed by your feelings, or do you feel them rather? And I was using the medical example as, let's say, a way of trying to understand that, if that makes sense. So let's say you have the psychiatrist, correct? Yeah. Psychiatrist giving you the medication for your depression, and it just doesn't work on you, right? And then you have psychologist who manages to talk to you in a way that allows you to delve into the problem from, let's say, a dream perspective, or
of Jung.
Of Jung, yeah, exactly, or from let's just say a different perspective, and through that, you yourself are cured of it because you allow yourself to be cured, right? Rather than taking something external into you and rebalancing your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels, whatever, right?
I absolutely understand.
And sorry, if I just may finish real fast. So if you look at it from a rational sense or a rational materialist perspective, It is you that control the feelings, because you can fix imbalance with a pill. But we know that that doesn't work a lot of the times. A lot of the times it's a soft fix. You know, it's like putting a Band-Aid over your bleeding. Your body fixes the bleeding overall, but you putting that Band-Aid allows it to maybe do a bit faster. So I guess what I'm saying is that even with pills, you have to work through them, you know? And that's a short way of saying I believe that it's a 50-50 split between feelings coming in and sort of, you know, let's say a feeling of anger coming in, sort of brute forcing its way into your psyche because something external happened, and you being able to deal with that internally by tempering it with something like love, right? So you take emotion and your own conscious experience and sort of meld them into a tool of vision and moving forward, if that makes sense. I feel like you have something to add.
Agree.
Okay.
Because you're saying, you know, something coming in and brute forcing its way into you.
Well, I use anger as an example,
No,
but
I get it, but you know, it's interesting because it makes me wonder. Well, what is, you know, are you saying that emotions come from outside somewhere?
That's an interesting question. Well, because I was trying to understand. Yeah, I was trying to understand the nature of the emotion, because I know for a fact. Well, I don't know for a fact. Let me take that back. It's the same question of where does thought come from, right? Emotion and thought are two things that are interlinked, right? Thought is something that the intellect uses, right? And emotion is something that the heart uses.
Yes.
If I can break it down to that. Now, neither one of them you own. You don't own thoughts. They just come. You know, where do they rise from the feet? Do they come from outside? Is it an angel? Is it a demon? Is it God? You know, the actual nature of a thought is not something that a lot of people understand, and it's not something that's easily understood. Because when a thought passes by, you can either grab onto it and go and see where it takes you, you know, the train of thought, or you leave it, right? Some thoughts are random that you may think, and some thoughts aren't. Well, in reality, nothing's random. You know, there's no coincidence of the way you think. There's obviously something affecting that. But let's say you have a bad thought. Do you own that? That's a question, right? So my question is the same for emotion. If you have, let's say, quote unquote, a bad emotion, right? A bad feeling. A perfect example, a lot of people, and I think we were talking about this maybe a couple of weeks ago, who will get off a plane, you know, before the plane takes off, it says, I need to get off this plane. I can't be here. And maybe something doesn't bad happen, like nothing bad happens, like the plane doesn't crash, and then maybe it does. Is it them that's telling themselves to get off the plane through that feeling, or is it something else telling them to get off the plane through that feeling? The emotional channel itself is almost what you own, but what comes in isn't, in my opinion.
Well, if that's the case, then what place is there for asking someone, why are you feeling this way?
Because even though you don't, let's say, own it, it comes from somewhere. Whether it be, maybe there's a distinction that I could make, that you and your soul are not the same people, which is a really weird way of putting it, because you yourself are a person. But if you're to remove that person and have what's left, right, being the soul, is that person that you are here the same as the soul? And one could argue yes, and then one could argue no. Because if I just real fast, and that's where I think my distinction comes from. It's yourself from a higher perspective sending down the emotion.
I see.
So it is yours, but it isn't yours. Or
you could say it is you, it isn't yours.
That's better. Yeah, it is you, but it isn't yours.
Because it's inside you and you experience it as arising from within you, right?
Yes.
So therefore it feels like it's you.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it is you feeling that thing
exactly.
or experiencing that.
It's almost like a signal. Emotions act as a signal for you to understand certain things. And that's why I believe maybe it's not exactly yours, but it is you. Because you need to figure something out. You need to explore that emotion more. Nobody can actually own anger. Or anything, you know. It's not like I say I'm the person who made anger. You know, it's a thing that everyone feels, And it's the same with every other emotion. Sadness, you don't own it. You can feel it, but you don't own it. Love as well. We can think of love as something greater than all those emotions, because it's love results in many, many emotions, or it can result in many, many emotions, and some of them can be bad. The root of it is love, though, or at least what I perceive it to be. And you can allude love to being God in that sense. And God is not really separate from you, because you are God. So again, if you look at the chain links all the way back, yes, maybe you do own your emotions, but in the way you perceive it in this physical realm, they aren't yours. I guess it's a very long-winded way of trying to understand that.
No, it does make sense. It doesn't help us to negotiate that, though, within ourselves in our day-to-day experience.
Oh, what do you think? Or rather, what do you feel?
Yeah. I feel that, emotions are like the weather, aren't they? They're like the clouds in the sky. They sort of come and go. They fluctuate a lot. They very heavily impact your experience of the day. You wake up and you see the sky that you want to see for that day.
Yeah.
And it really makes a big difference. And here in the north, if we wake up and see a completely blue sky, which these days is quite rare, it makes a big difference on how people respond to one another. You said that this morning.
True.
People were smiling.
Yeah. People were smiling.
Sunny days up here in the north, that's what happens.
Yep.
Perhaps if you live somewhere where it hasn't rained for a long time and you get rain clouds coming in, people might give you the same response.
True. Yeah.
And so what we see in the sky and the way we experience our emotions are actually very analogous, if not directly linked, and linked both ways. So when, I suppose, one doesn't normally feel that one has the power to change the weather for the day.
No.
The best you can do is be well dressed.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's a great way of putting it, the weather. I can't change the weather, but I can change how I perceive it.
Mm-hmm. Or
experience it, And that's what I was talking about. You don't own anger, you don't own sadness, and you don't own jealousy, love, all those kind of things. But you can perceive them in a way that makes you deal with them better.
Yes.
Right? So maybe also try and understand why you're feeling a certain way rather than feeling it. And it's very difficult to do, especially in the moment. I know I use anger as a good example because it's explosive kind of energy. It's fast, it reacts quickly, and it dies quickly as well. And oftentimes you're left with some pretty bad things. Sometimes great things. Out of anger, great things can come, especially if you deal with it in a good way. And there's some great quotes, that would say about specifically war and all that, is you don't kill with your hands, you kill with your heart. Because only a great warrior is only as great as his feeling is, his heart is. So he takes his brain, his mind, and uses that to make the decision to strike, but tempers it with his heart. And that's the warrior's perspective of anger, because it's a channeled one, right? He doesn't want the city to fall. He doesn't want to die on the battlefield, etc., etc. There's a lot of things that he don't want. So, but they can only do that through tempering their anger with love that comes from the heart, right? And that's a perspective of anger. Someone's like, I love anger, right? It's a Martian kind of thing. And again, it's maybe, I guess if you looked at it on a planetary level, it's Mars tempered by Venus, right? So I don't know if that answers it. What's the original question that you asked before? Who knows?
It makes me wonder whether thinking your way through your emotions is the best option. Because I've always thought that was the best way, was to analyse your emotions. It's interesting you say you don't, because people very often ask, well, why do you think like that? Why do you feel like that?
Yeah.
You know, where did this feeling come from? Well,
Yeah.
they're all thinking things.
Absolutely.
You know?
But
So to say that you don't think that's the way to approach understanding your emotional state
no.
is interesting. Because the other way is to just let the feeling feel itself out.
Yeah.
Almost like it's a storm or it's a sort of
I
weather.
also don't think that's a great way either.
Oh, okay.
You know, and the reason I don't say, I'm not saying I'm not guilty of it. I certainly am when it comes to trying to understand my thing. I might, again, try and piece together my emotions with a knife. It's not, you can't do that. But having said that, feeling them till the end, you are then no longer in control. Because as I was saying before, the weather being rainy, if you go through it without a raincoat, you're going to get wet, right? So there's a balance there. And this is what I was trying to get to. There's a balance in trying to understand emotions with your intellect and trying to understand emotions with your heart. They have to be in yoga, right? Because if not, you cannot understand why you feel a certain way. And if you use a knife to piece together those things, you're just going to dissect it even more. And you're going to be left with more pieces than when you started with. And the other way is that you might come out the tunnel or the end of the tunnel wet, you know, or worse, depending on the emotion, right? So whether it be anger, could be a passionate thing, but you could end up killing your loved one, right? You could, if you go through with jealousy, you might end up killing yourself in some way, right? If you go through it again in anger, you might end up being consumed by revenge. All of those outcomes are the ones where they let emotions ride them.
Yes.
Right? And the other side, you have one where you do not understand why you're feeling a certain way because you're thinking about it too much and not feeling it enough. So there is neither of those are best options. The best option is to bring those together. Right? And that's, I believe, how you can understand how emotions govern you. And that you don't only feel emotions, but emotions also feel you. Right? And that's where the 50-50 split comes, in my opinion.
So what do you suggest is a practical way to react or act when you become aware that your emotions are feeling you and they're riding you?
That's a great question. I always say take a minute. Take a minute to yourself. You know, internalize. That's the most important thing, because when emotions ride you, it's not you that's being affected, it's the people around you.
Yes.
Right? Especially when you're feeling angry or sad, those two are quite detrimental to your environment. Now, if you're feeling love and you want to ride love, there's nobody going to stop you. You know, in fact, that's probably the one you should be attaining for.
Absolutely.
You know, but so what is a practical way of looking at it? Now, I can only tell you from my own experience, and how I best dealt with it in the best scenario was to detach yourself for a moment from your environment. So if you're with someone that you love and you're feeling a certain way, you know, they'll understand because they're human as well. I need to take myself away from the situation for a second and look inside. And when I look inside, I can feel, but I can also think. Because both your brain and your heart are inside you. Yeah. You know? So yeah, detach for just a moment, understand with your intellect, and then feel with your heart. And that should happen internally before it happens externally. And people will understand that. You know, whoever you're with will understand that.
I think that's very good advice to just, when you're caught up in feeling something you don't understand, to actually step away and perhaps even allow yourself to observe it from the outside. You were saying detach, you know,
yes,
but to observe yourself and your actions from, as though you were watching yourself from the outside, because usually it's very easy then to see or to recognize that it's not you. This is not the you want to be anyway.
And that's exactly the point, because what I was referencing earlier actually was that it is yours. It is yourself, but it's not yours. You know, that's to understand that. It's to understand that this is the weather that I'm in right now, but I don't own the sky, right? I'm only being affected by it. And I take ownership of being outside in the rain, and I forgot to take an umbrella.
Yes.
So now I'm here and I've got to understand that. And I've got to know that and own it. I think those are the 3 most important things.
I think that's fantastic. And I think we've maybe reached the natural end.
I believe so. Well, thank you so much, guys, for listening. I hope you got something out of that. So, yeah, be at peace with yourself and love.
Always good advice.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye now.